Transport Minister Fikile Mbalula must be one of the busiest cabinet ministers around. His department has 12 entities, or 13 if you count the DLCA. They span across road, rail, maritime and aviation. But today, on this October Transport Month, we turn our attention to the roads in general and public transport in particular. Well, of course, it comes after the Congress of South African Trade Union, or COSATU, as well as a number of other labor union federations took to the streets calling for safe, affordable and reliable public transport. Minister Mbalula signed a memorandum to that effect. He conceded that there are some setbacks in the sector, but also acknowledged some successes that have been attained. He tells us a little bit more now about his plans for public transport. So, Minister, let's come straight to you. Let's talk about the taxi industry. One of COSATU's calls was for the professionalization, regulation and subsidization of the taxi industry, and you already have plans afoot that are well underway to make sure that those objectives are reached. Tell us a little bit about your intervention.
The demand of COSATU is not unreasonable. It's not a demand that cannot be met. It's a demand that has been in the pipeline of implementation, particularly when it comes to the taxi industry. There have been successive ministers, and really to their own due, they did their best and took us to where we are today. Our job is to really finish off where they actually ended. Part of it is the question of the taxi industry in relation to how it is actually organized in the Republic of South Africa. Is it formalized? No, it's not formalized in terms of the structure of the economy. Is it regulated? Yes, not fully. Is the taxi industry itself contributing to the economic growth of the country? Yes, it does. 40 billion rand or more to the gross domestic product annually in terms of our country. That is what the taxi industry does contribute. Is a 40 billion rand industry. So it tells you a story that is huge, and it is black. And successive years, right from the onset, Mac Maharaj laid the basis. Dala Omar came in, and then Jeff Radebe, Spoon Devele, and so on. But where we are stuck, which is what we are dealing with now, is to formalize the industry. And the taxi Lekgotla is going to assist us to deal with that. First time a year ago when we were appointed and a half by the president, our main focus and also the mandate of the sixth administration is to formalize the taxi industry. And this is what we are doing in the taxi Lekgotla. By now we would have gone to the Lekgotla if it were not disrupted by COVID. So we're going now, virtually or otherwise, will be in the Lekgotla to seek an agreement and a deal on this issue. What will entail in the deal? One is an agreement on formalizing the industry, which will mean regulating it. Ensure that there is an agreement on the licensing issues, and so that we are able to account for the total number of people who are on the road, which organizations they belong to, and so on, under which auspices, but in law. But over and above that, ensure that those organizations they belong to, cooperatives, they are actually registered. And then they pay what is called corporate tax. And when they basically pay corporate tax, you will then have registered workers for the UIF, which is what COSATU is demanding, and for everybody who works around the taxi industry. And when all of that has actually happened, you will have gone a long way in terms of the industry. But over and above that, you've got to address the question of the economic model empowerment model for the industry. So many taxis are sold, so many tires, fuel is being filled. How does that value chain add up to the benefit of the taxi industry? So that we're able to buy taxis which are defined by minimum standards in terms of how a taxi should look like, the colors for the taxis and all of that. So that is where we're actually going. But over and above that, we must subsidize this industry, which transport on a daily basis not less than 15 plus minus million people on the road. How do we? We are very clear that we need to subsidize, and our plan is that once we reach an agreement on a whole lot of these issues, that model will kick in from the 1st of April 2021. That's where we are going with the taxi industry and the taxi lekgotla. So the taxi lekgotla is not just a talk shop, it's a serious matter. And of course there are challenges in terms of unity of the taxi industry. There are challenges on this and that in relation to this unity about who leads and the taxi industry in the country. Those are issues that we're looking at, and some of them can hang on and we might not reach a solution on them, but it will be very clearer when we move in the next 2 weeks, when the real engagements in the provinces start and come into the national level as to what are the real issues of disagreement. And we are also going to package our own matters that we think we need to meet each other with the taxi industry on. So no one will be isolated from this. Everybody is going to be engaged. At the end, we hope to produce an agreement that we will implement for the taxi industry for many years to come, to make the industry a sunrise industry in the economy.
And of course, Minister, a taxi industry that is professional, that is regulated, and that is subsidized will work not only to the benefit of the players in the industry, but also to the benefit of government as well as the commuters. And when we pay particular attention to females or those who are differently abled, who make use of public transport and taxis, this lekgotla will benefit them as well. We heard from the president of COSATU today go into great details about how we need to make sure that GBV is put to an end also when it comes to public transport. So those matters, will they find expression as well in the lekgotla?
Yes, under professionalization. Once you have addressed these issues, obviously the industry will have to professionalize. You put up minimum standards. And then like any other industry, the challenge of GBV is prevalent in the taxi industry, and it will form part and parcel of the things that we need to fight. We know that we need to ensure that women are protected in the taxi industry as passengers, as business owners. You've got women who are in the industry who are widows, and they are actually at the receiving end when it comes to real empowerment and ownership, because it is their husbands who are owning the taxis, and when they pass away, and then the woman inherits the business. So you become a taxi owner by default, not by intention, because the person who was looking after the business had actually passed away, shot and killed for whatever reason, and so on, and then the woman then inherits that, and that on its own has basically disadvantaged widowers in the industry. So these are real issues. We are not creating fictitious stuff. We are dealing with issues that resonate with the industry itself from a practical experience, and that is our job, to basically deal with that. We need to get the taxi industry right in order for us to be able to invest and attract even investment to invest in the industry and actually make it lucrative for everybody to participate and draw the benefit. We can do it as long as we've got our set up proper from the point of view of formalizing the industry, regulating it properly, because formalization goes with the regulating the industry, fully regulated. It is regulated but not fully, because it is operating as an informal economy, the taxi industry. That is why people say they don't pay tax. Yes, when you purchase a taxi, you pay tax, VAT and all of that, but on a daily basis, you don't. And it was deliberate, because at the end of the day, given the scale of the business that you've got, you will not be in a position to afford certain things. And also an industry that is not subsidized, because from this point on, we will subsidize the taxi industry from the commuter, make it accessible, but at the same time safe. So the minimum standards will impose professionalization, that there are certain things that a driver must display in the taxi industry. There is a particular behavior that a driver must actually display. It's non-negotiable. It is regulated, and that for you to own a taxi, there are minimum standards you basically have got to maintain. So that make it complete. It's like buying a franchise. You can't just practice outside the franchise. What becomes the rule of that business countrywide? It can be Spare, it can be Nando's, wherever you own it. Even if it belongs to me, there are minimum standards that you've got to maintain that are distinct from others who sell chicken but that are just Nando's, or about any other company or franchise you can actually buy in the market. Now, the taxi industry, it is distinguishable because of uncharacteristic behavior from certain individuals. And in this particular instance, we will seek to undermine those traits and bring professional traits indeed that will make it known that this is how taxis in South Africa behave. And it will be the professional standards that would have been agreed, having signed a pact on what needs to be done from the Lekgotla.
Now, lastly and very briefly, still on the taxi industry, before we move on, Minister, maybe just speak to us about the empowerment model as well. You did allude to the fact that this is a tens of billions rand worth of an industry, but we are seeing that those who benefit from it are not always the ones who are most active, meaning the ones who wake up and travel and transport people every day. So in terms of the Lekgotla, what sort of focus will there be when it comes to the empowerment of those who need it most in the industry?
Is to agree on the empowerment model, is to agree on how do we define an empowerment model for the taxi industry, and where is the financial capital going to come from to finance the model itself, and how are we going to generate that. Once we have generated financial capital for the empowerment model to be sustainable, where are we going to bank the resources to be reinvested back into the industry and make it a point that whoever owns the industry can afford to own, and then it can be met halfway, and the industry itself is actually subsidized, and that me and you can use taxis and travel like any other place, knowing very well that we're protected and that it doesn't hit hard on our pockets. But at the same time, the owner of the taxi cannot say, hey, I'm running this thing at a loss. But there are benefits you can get out of running a business of taxi. Because in the value chain, I know when I buy tires, the money comes back home. It circulates within the system. And that is what is important in terms of the empowerment. As it is fragmented. The banks, yes, are basically the biggest beneficiaries, and there is an empowerment model already in the country that is operational, but you need to examine is it beneficial to the taxi owner and the industry? It doesn't matter. You can still own 1,000 taxis, 100,000 taxis, and all of that. But does it benefit us and as an industry? That you know that the people who own taxi industry are literally, you know, from our own townships and our own backyard. You get retrenched, you take your pension money and buy a taxi, and that is what actually happens in this particular instance. So those are the people who are talking about. Do they see value out of this? Is government partnering? If government is partnering and is coughing up money to subsidize, how is it going to do that? That will also minimize the feuds in the routes, killing each other for greed, basically. So it's a very important discussion, this. So those are the things that we seek to agree on. And then do we go the cooperative model or we go the independent model in terms of investment? Particularly if you talk about the bank approach and all of that. And these are the things that in the empowerment model will actually be talking about, the rebates and so on. The return that a person gets by owning a taxi and when you purchase, but also the person who's a traveler, a commuter and all of that, benefiting from the taxi industry, knowing very well that this is professional and I can save on it. And then it's not like when I use a taxi, there is nothing for me on the table for livelihoods when I go back home. And these are the people who are marching today.